Are you happy with the scheduling approach? Do you think they should do anything differently?
I think this is kind of something I've talked to you about in the past. I'm not a huge fan of the ACC setup for them. I was always really big on the traditional rivals. I miss playing Purdue and Michigan State every year for one. And the fact that they're not in a conference, joining possibly the weakest of the Power Five conferences to play 5 games every year. If they don't play Clemson, then it's going to look a little bit shaky at times. But then you go look at it, and next year they play Ohio State and Clemson in the same year, and the year after that they play Ohio State and Clemson in the same year, and then you're like, okay, so maybe this year is just a little bit of a break for them, and you can't have the hardest schedule in the world every year. I guess sometimes it's just okay to get a little lucky.
George is pulling no punches here in regards to, man, this is a difficult question. If you really want to take it seriously, who's the greatest Notre Dame football player of all time?
It's probably before my time frame. I mean, we're probably looking at, someone like Tim Brown. He's certainly up there. If we're looking at kind of more recent memory, I mean, obviously Jalen Smith, Manti Te'o were incredible college football players. Jerome Bettis, back in like the 90s as well. When you think of maybe historical standpoint and NFL standpoint, obviously Joe Montana, but I wouldn't necessarily say he was the best Notre Dame player of all time. I don't know, Mark. That is a tough question. They've had how many Heisman winners? So when a guy like me who just turned 28, more recent memory is something I'm going to look into. But yeah, no, I mean, it's you asked my dad about this a couple years ago. He'd probably slap me in the face for not mentioning some of the guys I haven't mentioned. So
yeah. Well, shoot, forget the sport. It doesn't really matter. It's just difficult to compare eras. And for a program that won most of its national championships in the 30s to 50s, something in that range. And of course they picked up some more in the 60s and 70s, not discounting that at all. But, it's just, football, the game has evolved so much and the athletes have evolved so much. But, if you were talking coaching, then the records from Ara Parseghian and Frank Leahy and those guys are just so overwhelming, the winning percentage and the number of championships that even though, again, different game to a certain extent, that's if you get these legendary names from every era, but you can't go from an athletic standpoint or a statistical standpoint and really back it up. But in terms of just winning football games, that's when they racked up the best winning percentage and obviously took a huge lead in near the most wins in history. Where's this? They're still in the top 5. I forget the pecking order exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're top. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're top 3 or 4 in both winning percentage and all-time wins. So,
yes, our friends at Michigan should be warned that I believe Ohio State overtook them in all-time winning percentage this past football season. I remember seeing that at some point during the year that if Ohio State won the rest of its games, and they did lose to Alabama. But anyway, basically Ohio State, from a winning percentage standpoint, for almost ever, Michigan had that lead, and Ohio State caught them apparently. And again, the wins totals are so close up near the top, and just about everybody's tracking down Michigan at this point. And I know you are not bothered by that.
I'm probably the most tame Notre Dame fan there is when it comes to hating Michigan. I could care less.
Yeah, it's more about USC, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, being a Vegas kid, growing up, I went to USC games every year against Notre Dame. I mean, it's Michigan just didn't bother me as much as I think people out in Indiana, in the Midwest, I should say, in general.
at least according to Wikipedia. Michigan 964, Ohio State 931, Alabama 929, Texas 923, Notre Dame 918. That's the top 5 in wins. Winning
I don't think that includes the or I think that does include the 2012 year where they took all of Brian Kelly's games.
Yeah, they took Notre Dame's wins away that year. Alabama lost a ton of games in 93. They went from what their record was that year. It wasn't great, but it was like 9-3 to 0-12. And Jim Tressel got his 12-1 season wiped out in 2010. So I don't even see any use in doing that. They should just leave all that alone. That's not penalizing anybody in particular. But yeah, winning percentage, Ohio State, man, we've got a logjam. Ohio State at 730, Alabama 729, Notre Dame 729, Michigan 727. So they've dropped to 4th, and Oklahoma 726. There you go.